They called me a burden at Christmas dinner. So I sold the family home they all lived in. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 72 years old, and I lived, in a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in Mystic, Connecticut, just minutes from the water. This is the story of how my own family pushed me too far, and how I finally taught them a lesson they'd never forget. Starting when my daughter-in-law Betrayal looked me dead in the eye over Christmas dinner and told everyone at the table that I was nothing but a burden they all had to carry. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand just how we got to that moment. I've always been what people call a giver. My late husband Robert and I worked hard our entire lives. He was a maritime insurance adjuster, and I taught 3rd grade for 37 years. We saved every penny, paid off our mortgage early, and turned our house into a real home. When Robert passed away 6 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I thought I'd be lonely rattling around in that big house by myself. I was wrong about being lonely, but not in the way I expected. It started with my son Marcus. He was going through what he called a rough patch after his divorce from his first wife. Marcus had always been my baby, my youngest at 45, still trying to find himself, as he put it. When he showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and that hangdog expression I remembered from when he was 12, what was I supposed to do? Turn away my own child? Just until I get back on my feet, Mom, he promised, setting his bags down in the foyer. Maybe 6 months, tops. That was 3 years ago. Then came Betrayal, his new girlfriend. She was younger, not inappropriately so, but young enough to still think the world owed her something. Betrayal had what she called entrepreneurial dreams, but what I recognized as an aversion to steady work. She moved in 8 months after Marcus, bringing with her a constant stream of get-rich-quick schemes and an entitled attitude that set my teeth on edge from day one. "Mrs. H," she'd say in that saccharine voice, "you don't mind if I use your kitchen for my meal prep business, do you? I'll be cooking for maybe 15 clients, just temporarily." Temporarily turned into 6 months of my kitchen being destroyed daily, my grocery bills tripling, and Betrayal acting like she was doing me a favor by letting me help clean up the mess. But it wasn't just Marcus and Betrayal. Oh no, that would have been manageable. My daughter Patricia, my successful put-together daughter who worked in pharmaceutical sales, had her own crisis. Her husband Derek lost his job in corporate restructuring, and suddenly they couldn't make their mortgage payments. Patricia had always been proud, almost to a fault. So when she finally called me, I could hear the shame in her voice. "Mom, I hate to ask, but we're looking at foreclosure. Derek's been interviewing, but nothing's panned out yet. Would it be possible to stay with you? Just until we can figure something out?" How do you say no to that? How do you tell your daughter, who's worked hard her entire life, that she can't come home when she needs help? So Patricia, Derek, and their 16-year-old son Camden moved into the guest room in the converted basement rec room. Derek, it turned out, was one of those men who turned bitter when life knocked him down. Instead of spending his day's job hunting, he spent them on my couch, watching financial news and complaining about how the economy was rigged against guys like him. Camden, my grandson, was actually the bright spot in all of this chaos. He was a good kid, working part-time at a local pizza place and saving for college. But even he started to take my generosity for granted after a while, leaving messes for me to clean up and assuming I'd always be there to pick up the slack. Then there was my sister-in-law Dolores, Robert's older sister, who had been living with various family members since her husband died 2 years earlier. She was supposed to stay with her son in Arizona, but that didn't work out. Apparently, his wife didn't appreciate Dolores's helpful suggestions about their marriage. "Eleanor, you have all this space," she said when she showed up with her 3 cats and enough belongings to fill a U-Haul. And Robert would have wanted family to stick together. She wasn't wrong about that. Robert had been big on family loyalty. But Robert had also never had to live with Dolores full-time. She had opinions about everything. How I cooked, how I cleaned, how I managed my finances, how I was spoiling Marcus and Brielle by letting them live rent-free. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the first year, I tried to see it as a blessing. The house was full of life again. There were voices in the hallways, activity in the kitchen, reasons to cook big meals. I told myself this was what Robert would have wanted. Our home being a safe harbor for family in need. But blessing slowly turned to burden, though I wasn't the one carrying it. No one contributed to the household expenses. Not really. Marcus would occasionally buy groceries, but only the specific organic, name-brand items he and Brielle preferred. Patricia would slip me $100 now and then for utilities, as if $100 covered anything close to the extra costs of housing 5 additional adults and 3 cats. Derek seemed to think that because he was between opportunities, basic courtesies didn't apply to him. He'd use my home office for his job search calls, leaving the space a mess. He'd eat food I'd bought for specific meals without asking, then act surprised when I mentioned it. "Oh, sorry, Eleanor," he'd say with that sheepish grin that never quite reached his eyes. "I didn't realize you were saving that. I'll replace it next time I'm at the store." Next time never came. Brielle was worse. She treated my house like her personal business headquarters and me like her unpaid assistant. Her meal prep business evolved into nutrition consulting, which meant she'd have clients over for meetings in my living room, moving my furniture around, and leaving protein powder residue on my coffee table. "Mrs. H, could you maybe not vacuum tomorrow morning?" she'd ask. "I have a very important call with a potential investor, and I need absolute quiet." When I gently suggested she might rent actual office space, she looked at me like I'd suggested she move to Mars. Why would I do that when we have all this space? Here. Besides, I'm reinvesting everything back into growing the business. That's what entrepreneurs do. What entrepreneurs apparently also do is leave used workout equipment in the living room, host strategy sessions that lasted until midnight on weeknights, and assume their business partner's elderly mother-in-law will handle all the cleanup. Dolores, meanwhile, had appointed herself the house manager. She'd criticize my grocery choices, rearrange my kitchen cabinets for better efficiency, and constantly offer unsolicited advice about how I should handle the kids. "You're enabling them, Eleanor," she'd say, shaking her head as she watched Marcus sleep until noon on a Tuesday. Robert never would have allowed this kind of behavior. But when I suggested that maybe the situation had become unsustainable, suddenly she'd change her tune. "Well, we all have to make sacrifices for family. That's what being a Christian means." The worst part wasn't the mess, or the expenses, or even the lack of privacy. The worst part was watching them all gradually shift from grateful to entitled. The thank yous became less frequent. The consideration for my schedule disappeared. The acknowledgement that this was my house, my home, my sanctuary, that evaporated entirely. Marcus started bringing friends over without asking, treating my living room like his personal entertainment space. Brielle began receiving business deliveries, boxes of supplements and workout equipment that she'd stack in my garage without so much as a heads up. Derek took over my basement workshop, claiming he needed space for his projects, which seemed to consist mainly of online poker and day trading tutorials. Even Patricia, my responsible daughter, started taking liberties. She'd invite her friends over for wine nights, assuming I'd play hostess. When I mentioned that I had early morning appointments and needed quiet evenings, she'd say, "Oh, Mom, don't be antisocial. It's good for you to have people around. If I had any choice in the matter. The incident started small. Brielle using my credit card to order business supplies, just this once, and then taking 3 weeks to pay me back. Derek eating the last of everything without replacing it, then acting confused when I had nothing to serve when my book club came over. Dolores rearranging my living room furniture because she thought my setup was inefficient. But they escalated. There was the morning I woke up to find my kitchen completely destroyed because Brielle had decided to meal prep at 3 a.m. without cleaning as she went. Dishes piled in the sink, ingredients splattered across the counters, my good pots and pans left soaking in greasy water. When I addressed it, she looked genuinely confused. I was going to clean it up later. I had an early client call. Later turned out to be never, because she was too busy with her business. There was the evening Derek invited his unemployed buddies over for poker night, without telling anyone. I came home from dinner with friends to find 6 strange men in my living room, smoking cigars and drinking my liquor. When I asked Derek to move the game elsewhere, he actually laughed. Come on, Eleanor. Don't be such a prude. We're not hurting anything. The cigar smoke took 3 days to wear out of my curtains. There was the week Marcus decided to renovate the basement without consulting me, tearing out built-in shelving that Robert had installed by hand, and leaving the space looking like a construction zone. When I expressed concern, he got defensive. Was trying to make it nicer down there. I thought you'd be happy I was taking initiative. Taking initiative with my house, using my credit card to buy supplies, and making decisions about my property without even mentioning it to me. The breaking point, or what I thought was the breaking point, came in November. Patricia's friend Sandra was getting divorced and needed just a few days to figure out her living situation. Those few days turned into 2 weeks of Sandra crying on my couch, eating my food, and treating my home like a therapy retreat. When I finally suggested that 2 weeks was long enough, Patricia was incredulous. Mom, she's going through a really hard time. Where's your compassion? My compassion, I said as calmly as I could manage, has been housing 6 people and 3 cats for 3 years. My compassion has been paying grocery bills that have tripled and utility bills that have doubled. My compassion has been giving up my privacy, my routine, and my peace of mind. My compassion has limits. Patricia stared at me like I'd slapped her. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Sandra just needs support. Selfish. That word hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, a 72-year-old woman who had opened her home and her wallet to everyone who asked, and I was being called selfish for suggesting that maybe, just maybe, there should be some boundaries. But even that wasn't the final straw. The final straw came at Christmas dinner. I had been planning Christmas dinner for weeks. Despite everything, I still loved having family together for the holidays. I still believed that somewhere underneath all the entitlement and thoughtlessness, these were people who loved me and appreciated what I'd done for them. I was wrong. I spent 3 days cooking. Traditional Christmas Eve dinner with all the fixings, Christmas morning breakfast, and then the big Christmas dinner. Turkey, ham, all the sides anyone could want, 3 different desserts. I bought gifts for everyone. Thoughtful, personal. Gifts that I'd spent time choosing and considerable money purchasing. The morning started off well enough. Camden was genuinely excited about the laptop I'd bought him for college applications. Patricia seemed to appreciate the cashmere scarf I'd chosen. Even Derek managed a sincere thank you for the expensive tools I'd gotten him, hoping they might inspire him to actually work on some projects. But by dinner time, the atmosphere had shifted. It started with seating arrangements. Brielle decided that the traditional seating I'd planned didn't work for her business discussion with Derek. Apparently, they were talking about some investment opportunity that couldn't wait until after Christmas. She moved place cards around, without asking, putting Dolores next to Camden, which I knew would result in her lecturing him about his table manners all evening. Then Marcus announced that he'd invited his friend Kyle to join us because Kyle was alone for the holidays. This was news to me, and Kyle turned out to be the kind of person who helped himself to multiple servings, while others were still waiting for their first. But I adapted. I always adapted. I set another place, stretched the food a little further, smiled and played the gracious hostess, even as my carefully planned dinner became chaos. The conversation during dinner was the first warning sign. Instead of the usual family catching up, it turned into a series of complaints about money problems, job market difficulties, and general life dissatisfactions. I found myself in the strange position of being the only one at my own table who wasn't complaining about something. Derek started it. You know, this economy is just impossible for guys like me. Companies want to hire kids straight out of college for half the salary. Experience doesn't count for anything anymore. Betrayal chimed in. Tell me about it. Nobody wants to invest in real businesses anymore. Everyone's looking for the next app or tech thing. Traditional wellness services are completely undervalued. Marcus nodded along. It's like the whole system is designed to keep us down. We're all working harder than ever and getting nowhere. Bit my tongue. Marcus hadn't worked a steady job in 3 years. Betrayal's wellness services consisted mainly of posting inspirational quotes on Instagram, and Derek's job search seemed to consist primarily of online complaints about potential employers. But then Dolores, of all people, made it worse. Well, some of us are luckier than others, she said, looking pointedly at me. Some of us don't have to worry about where our next meal's coming from, or whether we'll have a roof over our heads. The implication was clear, and it stung. Yes, I was financially secure, but that security came from 40 years of careful saving, smart investments, and living below our means, even when we could have afforded more. Robert and I had sacrificed vacations, driven old cars, and bought generic groceries so we could pay off our mortgage early and build a nest egg. That's true, I said carefully. Robert and I were very fortunate to be able to plan for retirement. Must be nice, Derek muttered, not quite under his breath. That's when Betrayal decided to escalate things. You know what, Mrs. H? You should really think about downsizing. This house is way too big for one person, and you could probably make a fortune selling it. Think about all the equity you're sitting on while the rest of us are struggling. The audacity took my breath away. Here was a woman who had been living in my house rent-free for over 2 years, suggesting I sell it for her benefit. This is my home, Betrayal, I said quietly. Robert and I built our life here. But it's not practical, she continued, warming to her theme. You could get a cute little condo somewhere, bank the difference, and everyone would benefit. It's like you're hoarding resources, hoarding resources. I repeated the phrase, trying to process the accusation. Patricia, bless her, tried to redirect. Betrayal, that's Mom's decision to make. But Marcus, my own son, piled on. Actually, Betrayal has a point. Mom, you're going to need more care as you get older, and maintaining this place is going to get harder. Maybe it would be better to make a change now, while you can still enjoy the money. Enjoy the money. As if I hadn't been enjoying my money by spending it on groceries, utilities, and household expenses for all of them. Dolores nodded sagely. Robert always said the house was too much for you to handle alone. He used to worry about you rattling around in here by yourself. That was a lie, and we all knew it. Robert had loved this house and had specifically told me never to let anyone pressure me into leaving it. But then came the moment that changed everything. Camden, my grandson, looked up from his phone and said, "Honestly, Grandma, this place is kind of depressing anyway. It's like living in a museum. You never let anyone change anything or make improvements." The improvements he was referring to were Marcus's unauthorized basement demolition and Brielle's business takeover of the first floor. "Maybe," said Kyle, the uninvited guest, "you should think about what's best for everyone, not just yourself." I looked around the table at these people, my family and their hangers-on, who were sitting in my house, eating food I'd bought and prepared, using dishes I'd washed and silverware I'd polished, in a home I'd spent 50 years making beautiful and comfortable, and they were telling me to sell it. But even then, I might have let it go. I might have written it off to holiday stress and too much wine. I might have continued being the accommodating, generous person I'd always been. But then Brielle opened her mouth one more time. "Look, Mrs. H, I'm just going to be honest here. You're becoming a real burden to everyone. We're all walking on eggshells around you, worried about upsetting you, having to manage your feelings about every little thing. We can't live our lives because we're constantly having to consider what Eleanor wants. It's exhausting." The table went completely silent. Even Kyle stopped chewing. Patricia looked mortified. "Brielle, that's—" "No, I'm serious," Brielle continued, apparently mistaking the silence for encouragement. "We're all adults here, and we should be able to have honest conversations. Everyone's been thinking it, and I'm just saying it out loud. Eleanor, you've become a burden. To all of us. And maybe it's time to think about what would actually be helpful instead of just expecting everyone to tiptoe around your feelings." A burden. I was a burden. I had opened my home to people in need. I had stretched my budget to accommodate everyone's expenses. I had given up my privacy, my routine, my space, and my peace of mind. I had cooked and cleaned and organized and managed and sacrificed for 3 years straight. And I was the burden. I looked around the table one more time. Marcus was staring at his plate, not defending me. Patricia looked uncomfortable but wasn't saying anything. Derek was nodding slightly, as if Brielle had voiced something he'd been thinking. Dolores was pursing her lips in that way that meant she agreed, but wouldn't say so directly. Camden was back to looking at his phone, as if this conversation didn't concern him. Only Kyle seemed uncomfortable, but then he barely knew me. I stood up slowly, my napkin falling to the floor. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to get some air." I walked out of my own dining room, through my own living room, and out my own front door. I sat on the porch swing Robert had installed 15 years ago, looking out at the garden we'd planted, together, and I made a decision. If I was such a burden, then I would stop being one. I didn't go back inside that night. I sat on that porch swing until nearly midnight, wrapped in Robert's old coat, thinking about everything that had brought me to this moment. The years of gradual encroachment on my space and my generosity. The slow erosion of gratitude into entitlement. The complete lack of consideration for my feelings or my needs. The word burden echoed in my mind, not just because Brielle had said it, but because of how easily it had been accepted by everyone else at that table. No one had rushed to defend me. No one had pointed out the irony of calling someone a burden while living in their house rent-free. No one had reminded Brielle that she was a guest in my home. That told me everything I needed to know about how my family really saw me. When I finally went inside, the dinner dishes were still on the table. No one had cleared them. No one had put away the leftovers. My beautiful Christmas dinner was sitting there congealing, abandoned, just like I had been. I spent the rest of the night cleaning up my own party, alone, while everyone else was presumably asleep in my house, in beds I'd made with sheets I'd washed, in rooms I heated and cooled and maintained. By the time I finished cleaning the kitchen, it was nearly 3 a.m., and my mind was crystal clear I was going to sell the house. Not because Betrayal thought I should. Not because it made financial sense. Not because anyone would benefit. I was going to sell the house because I was done being taken advantage of. I was done being called a burden by people who had turned me into their personal ATM and hotel service. I was going to sell the house, and I was going to do it without telling any of them until it was too late for them to guilt me out of it. Kalarichi Takikaos. Next morning, December 26th, I called my lawyer. Richard Henley had been my attorney for 15 years, ever since he'd helped Robert and me update our wills. He was semi-retired, only taking on clients he'd worked with for years, but he'd always told me to call if I needed anything. "Eleanor, what a nice surprise," he said when his secretary put me through. "How was your Christmas?" "Illuminating," I said. "Richard, I need to sell my house. Quickly and quietly. What do I need to do?" There was a pause. "Are you all right? This seems sudden." "I'm fine. I'm actually clearer than I've been in years. I need to know my options for selling the house without my current house guests being able to interfere with the process." Richard was a good lawyer. He asked the right questions without being nosy, and he understood the situation quickly. Yes, the house was entirely in my name. No, there were no legal obligations to the people living with me. Yes, I could sell it whenever I wanted to, whomever I wanted for whatever price I deemed acceptable. "The only consideration," he said, "is notice. You'll need to give them reasonable time to find alternative housing. 30 days is typical. 60 days would be generous." "What about the sale process? How long does that usually take?" "In the current market, with a house like yours, if you price it right, you could have offers within a week. Closing could happen in 30 to 45 days if the buyers are pre-approved. So I could have a sold house with a closing date in about 6 weeks." "Easily. Eleanor, are you sure about this? It's a big decision." I thought about Betrayal calling me a burden. I thought about Derek helping himself to my food and my space, and my patience without ever saying thank you. I thought about Marcus sleeping until noon in my house while complaining that life wasn't fair. I thought about 3 years of my generosity, being taken for granted and finally being thrown back in my face. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. By New Year's Day, I had a plan. Richard recommended Margaret Ashford, a real estate agent he'd worked with before. Margaret was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in high-end properties and understood discretion. When I met with her on January 2nd, she took one look at my house and smiled. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is going to sell quickly. Historic charm, modern updates, prime location near the water. Properties like this don't last long on the market." "How quickly?" "If we list it right, I'd expect multiple offers within the first week. Are you looking for a quick sale or maximum profit?" "Quick sale. I want this done as efficiently as possible." Margaret walked through the house with me, taking notes and pictures. We had to work around my house guests, who were curious about her presence, but accepted my explanation that I was getting a market evaluation for insurance purposes. "You might want to consider minor staging," Margaret said diplomatically, noting the workout equipment in my living room and the general chaos that came with housing 6 adults and 3 cats. "That won't be necessary," I said. "We're selling it as is, and the buyers will be able to see its potential. What I didn't say was that I wasn't about to spend money staging a house for people who would be gone long before any buyers came through." Margaret suggested a listing price that was fair but attractive, enough below market value to generate immediate interest, but not so low as to seem suspicious. We scheduled the listing to go live on January 15th, with the first showings that weekend. I signed all the paperwork and gave Margaret a key. Then I went home and acted like nothing had changed. The 2 weeks between hiring Margaret and listing the house were surreal. I went about my normal routine, cooking and cleaning and managing the household, while internally counting down the days until everything would change. My family, oblivious to what was coming, settled back into their post-holiday patterns. Marcus continued his routine of sleeping late and complaining about the lack of good job opportunities. Brielle ramped up her business activities, apparently having forgotten entirely about calling me a burden, or perhaps thinking I'd forgotten about it. Derek started a new project in my basement, something involving cryptocurrency mining that required expensive equipment and made my electric bill skyrocket. When I mentioned the increased costs, he waved me off. It's an investment, Elena. Once this thing takes off, I'll be able to pay you back everything I owe and then some. He'd been saying the same thing about various schemes for 3 years. Patricia went back to work after the holidays and seemed to assume that the unpleasantness of Christmas dinner had blown over. She was back to having friends over and using my house as her social headquarters, still treating me more like a roommate than the homeowner. Dolores had decided that January was the perfect time to reorganize my household systems. She appointed herself the manager of my pantry, my linen closet, and my filing system, making changes without consulting me and then acting proud of her improvements. Only Camden seemed to sense that something was different. A few times I caught him looking at me with a puzzled expression, as if he couldn't quite figure out what had changed. But he was busy with school and his part-time job, so he didn't pursue it. I, meanwhile, was experiencing something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to something. I was looking forward to reclaiming my life. I started making plans for after the sale. I researched condos in warmer climates, looked into senior communities that offered independence with optional services, and even considered renting a place temporarily while I figured out what I really wanted. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I could travel. I could join clubs and take classes without worrying about getting home to cook dinner for 6 people. I could have friends over without navigating around other people's schedules and belongings. I could live in a space that was entirely my own again. I realized I hadn't been truly happy in years. I'd been useful, and I'd been needed. But I hadn't been happy. There's a difference between being appreciated and being taken advantage of, and I'd crossed that line so gradually that I hadn't noticed until Brielle's burden comment forced me to see it clearly. On January 14th, the night before the listing went live, I sat in my living room after everyone had gone to bed. Brielle's workout equipment was stacked in the corner. Derek's mining rig hummed in the basement. Marcus's clothes were draped over my good furniture. Dolores's cats had left hair on everything. This had been my sanctuary once. Mine and Robert's. We'd chosen every piece of furniture carefully, painted every wall together, planned every improvement as a team. Now it felt like a hotel where the guests had stopped pretending to be grateful. Tomorrow, everything would change. Margaret called me at 8 a.m. on January 15th. Eleanor, we're live. The listing posted an hour ago, and I've already gotten 3 calls from interested buyers. My heart pounded, but with excitement, not fear. That's wonderful. I'm scheduling showings for this weekend. Will Saturday and Sunday work for you? I thought about my house guests, none of whom had any weekend plans that didn't involve using my space for their own purposes. Saturday and Sunday will be perfect. By noon, Margaret called again. We have 7 showings scheduled for the weekend, and I've gotten calls from 4 different agents asking about private showings for their clients. This is going to move fast. That evening, I made an announcement at dinner. I'll need everyone to make sure the house is tidy this weekend. I'm having some work done, and there will be people coming through to give estimates. It wasn't technically a lie. Margaret was working, and she would be giving estimates to potential buyers. Marcus looked up from his phone. What kind of work? Just some updates I've been considering. Nothing major. Brielle perked up. Are you finally going to modernize the kitchen? I have so many ideas for making it more functional. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now that she thought she might benefit from improvements, suddenly she was interested in the house's potential. We'll see, I said non-committally. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. I had spent Friday evening making sure the house was as presentable as possible given the circumstances. I couldn't do anything about the general chaos of 6 adults, living in a space designed for 2, but I could make sure it was clean. The first showing was at 10 a.m. Margaret arrived 15 minutes early to do a final walkthrough and give me last-minute instructions. Just act natural. If anyone asks about the other residents, just say they're family members who are in transition. Don't volunteer information, but don't be secretive either. What about them? I gestured toward the living room where Marcus and Brielle were having coffee and discussing her latest business idea. Let them be themselves. Honestly, Eleanor, buyers might actually see this as a positive. Proof that the house can accommodate extended family if needed. At exactly 10 a.m., a well-dressed couple in their 50s arrived with their agent. Margaret introduced them as the Hendersons, looking to downsize from a larger property in the area. I watched from the kitchen as Margaret showed them through the house. They seemed charmed by the original hardwood floors and the crown molding. They admired the updated bathrooms and the modern heating system. They even complimented the way the bedrooms were arranged to give each resident privacy. Marcus and Brielle were polite but distracted, treating the showing as a minor inconvenience. Derek was in the basement with his mining equipment, so they could hear the humming but didn't encounter him directly. Dolores was out with her cats at the veterinarian, so her presence wasn't an issue. The showing lasted about 30 minutes, and I could tell from Margaret's expression that it had gone well. The second showing was at noon, a young family with 2 children, looking for a house with character and good schools. They loved the neighborhood and the proximity to the water, but I could see them trying to envision the space without all the extra occupants and belongings. The third showing was at 2 p.m., and that's when things got interesting. The buyers were an older couple, probably close to my age, looking for a house they could age in place. They were charmed by the original features and impressed by the accessibility modifications Robert and I had made over the years. But they were also clearly experienced homebuyers who asked pointed questions about the other residents. Are you planning to continue living here after the sale? The woman asked me directly. Margaret stepped in smoothly. Mrs. Hartwell is exploring her options for the next phase of her life. And the other family members? They're in transition as well. The couple exchanged a look that I recognized. They were interested in the house but wanted to make sure they weren't buying into a complicated situation. After they left, Margaret pulled me aside. Eleanor, we need to talk about logistics. These buyers are serious, but they're going to want to know about occupancy at closing. When are you planning to inform your family about the sale? I had been dreading this question, but I was ready for it. I'll tell them when we have an accepted offer. I want to present it as a done deal, not a possibility they can talk me out of. Margaret nodded. That's probably wise. But be prepared for some difficult conversations, if she only knew how difficult. By Sunday evening, we had seen 12 different potential buyers. Margaret's phone had been ringing constantly with agents wanting to schedule additional showings for the following week. Monday morning she called, with news. Eleanor, we have 3 offers. All of them are above asking price, and 2 of them are cash offers with flexible closing dates. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. Tell me about them. The first offer was from the Hendersons, the couple who had been our first showing. They offered $15,000 over asking price, wanted a 60-day closing, and had no contingencies other than a standard inspection. The second offer was from a cash buyer who had seen the house Sunday afternoon, a local developer who wanted to renovate and flip it. He offered $20,000 over asking price and could close in 30 days, but wanted to buy it as is, with no cellar repairs. The third offer was from the older couple who had asked about occupancy. They offered $18,000 over asking price, wanted a 45-day closing, and included a personal letter about how much they loved the house and would take care of it. Which one do you recommend? I asked Margaret. Honestly? The developer's offer is the cleanest. Cash, quick closing, no complications. But if you care about what happens to the house after you're gone, the older couple seems like they treat it as a home, not an investment. I thought about Robert and how much he had loved this house. He would have wanted it to go to people who would appreciate it, not someone who would gut it for profit. I want to accept the older couple's offer. The Weatherbys, right? The Weatherbys. Yes. Eleanor, are you sure? It's $2,000 less than the developer's offer. I'm sure. Can we close in 30 days instead of 45? I can ask. They seem motivated. Good. I want this done as quickly as possible. Margaret paused. Eleanor, once I submit your acceptance, this becomes real. You'll need to tell your family soon. I know. I'll tell them tonight. But I didn't tell them that night. Or the next night. Or the night after that. The truth was, I was savoring these last few days of secret knowledge. For the first time in years, I had control over something that would affect all of them, and they had no idea. After years of having my home invaded, my generosity taken for granted, and my feelings dismissed, I had the power. And I wasn't ready to give that up just yet. The Weatherbys' inspection was scheduled for Thursday morning. Margaret warned me that it would take several hours and involve a thorough examination of every system in the house. Will your family be around? She asked. Probably. Why? Inspectors ask a lot of questions. They might wonder why there are so many people living here. Let them wonder. Thursday morning arrived with a light snow falling. The inspector, a methodical man named Tom who had been examining houses longer than I'd been teaching school, arrived promptly at 9 a.m. with a clipboard and a flashlight. Marcus and Betrayal were in the kitchen when he knocked, having one of their typical morning conversations about Betrayal's business prospects and Marcus's job search complaints. Who's that? Marcus asked when I went to answer the door. The inspector I told you about, I said, which was true. I had mentioned that someone would be coming to inspect the house, though I'd let them assume it was routine maintenance. Tom was professional and thorough. He examined the electrical system, tested the plumbing, checked the heating and cooling, inspected the roof and the foundation. He made notes constantly but didn't seem concerned about anything he found. Derek emerged from the basement when Tom needed to inspect the electrical panel and the furnace. What's all this about? Derek asked, eyeing Tom's equipment suspiciously. Routine inspection, Tom said without elaborating. He was used to curious residents and didn't engage in unnecessary conversation. But Derek wasn't satisfied. He followed Tom around the basement, asking questions about what he was looking for and why it was necessary. Tom answered politely but minimally, focused on his work. Eleanor, Derek called up the stairs. What kind of inspection is this exactly? Just making sure everything is in good working order, I called back, which was technically true. When Tom finished with the basement, he moved to the second floor, Patricia was working from home that day and had set up her laptop in the guest room she shared with Derek and Camden. She looked up when Tom knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, I need to inspect this room." "Oh, of course." Patricia gathered her papers and moved to the hallway. "What are you inspecting for?" "Standard home inspection. Checking windows, electrical outlets, plumbing fixtures." Patricia glanced at me. "Mom, you didn't mention you were having a home inspection." "It seemed like a good idea," I said. "The house is getting older, and I want to make sure everything is safe and up to code." Which was true in a way. The Weatherbys wanted to make sure everything was safe and up to code. The inspection took 4 hours. Tom examined every room, every closet, every system. He took photos and made extensive notes. When he finished, he spent another 30 minutes with Margaret, discussing his findings and timeline for the written report. After they left, my family was full of questions. That was pretty thorough for a routine inspection. Patricia said, "Are you thinking of making some major renovations?" "Why would you need such a detailed inspection unless you were planning to sell?" Derek asked, and my heart stopped for a moment. But then Marcus laughed. "Mom's not selling the house, Derek. Where would we all go?" Where indeed? Brielle chimed in. "Maybe she's thinking about getting a reverse mortgage or something. My friend's grandmother did that. Had to get a big inspection for the bank. I let them speculate. The truth would come out soon enough." Tom's inspection report came back Friday afternoon, and it was better than I'd hoped. The house was in excellent condition for its age, with only minor recommendations for maintenance items that were normal for any older home. Margaret called immediately. "Eleanor, this is a clean report. The Weatherbys are going to be thrilled. Their agent already called to say they're still very interested and asking about moving up the closing date. How soon can we close?" "They can do 3 weeks if you're ready. That would put us at February 10th. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, I would no longer own this house, and everyone living in it would have to find somewhere else to go. Let's do it," I said. "Helena, I have to ask one more time. Are you prepared for the reaction when you tell your family?" I thought about Christmas dinner. I thought about being called a burden by someone who had been living in my house rent-free for 2 years. I thought about 3 years of watching my generosity be taken for granted and my feelings dismissed. I'm prepared. When will you tell them? Tonight. But Friday night came and went, and I still couldn't bring myself to say the words. They were all there at dinner. Marcus complaining about a job interview that didn't go well. Brielle talking about a new marketing strategy for her business. Derek explaining his latest cryptocurrency theory. Patricia discussing a work project. Camden telling us about his college application progress. Dolores critiquing everyone's table manners. They were so absorbed in their own lives, so comfortable in their assumption that this arrangement would continue indefinitely, that I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Saturday morning, Margaret called again. "Eleanor, the buyers are getting anxious. They want to confirm that the house will be vacant at closing." "It will be." "Have you told your family yet?" "I'm telling them today." "Good, because we're going to need to start coordinating with their, agent on final details, and the buyers will want to do a final walkthrough a few days before closing." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen. My kitchen that would belong to someone else in 3 weeks. And finally admitted to myself that I was scared. Not of their reaction, exactly, but of the finality of it all. Once I said the words, there would be no taking them back. The life I had known for the past 3 years, difficult as it had been, would be over. But then I remembered how I felt on Christmas night, sitting on that porch swing, and I knew I was making the right choice. Decided to tell them at Sunday dinner. It seemed appropriate, somehow, to make this announcement at the same table where Betrayal had called me a burden. I cooked a nice meal, pot roast with all the fixings, the kind of comfort food everyone enjoyed. I set the table carefully, using the good china and cloth napkins. If this was going to be one of our last family dinners in this house, I wanted it to be memorable. Everyone was in a good mood. Marcus had gotten a callback for a job interview. Betrayal had landed a new client. Derek's cryptocurrency investment was supposedly showing promise. Patricia had gotten approval for a work project she'd been pushing for. Even Dolores seemed less critical than usual, and Camden was excited about acceptance letters he was expecting from colleges. As we settled into dessert, a chocolate cake I'd made from scratch, I decided it was time. "I have something I need to tell you all," I said, setting down my fork. "Are you finally going to tell us about all the mysterious people who've been through the house lately?" Derek asked with a grin. "Because that was definitely not a routine inspection." "In a way, yes." I took a deep breath. "I've sold the house." The silence was immediate and complete. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to pause. Marcus was the first to speak. "What do you mean, you've sold the house?" "I mean I accepted an offer from buyers. We've completed the inspection and we're closing in 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Patricia's voice cracked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that this house is sold. The new owners take possession on February 10th. Betrayal started laughing, but it wasn't a happy sound. "This is a joke, right? You're not serious." "I'm completely serious." Derek leaned back in his chair, his face red. "Eleanor, you can't just sell the house without discussing it with us. We live here." "You live here as my guests," I said calmly. "And I can absolutely sell my own house without discussing it with anyone." "But where are we supposed to go?" Marcus asked, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the little boy I remembered, confused and frightened. "I assume you'll find places to live, just like adults do." "In 3 weeks?" Patricia was standing now, pacing behind her chair. "Mom, this is insane. You can't give us 3 weeks' notice to find new housing. That's not even legal." "Actually, it is legal." I checked with my lawyer. 30 days is considered reasonable notice, and you're getting 21 days. Dolores, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally found her voice. "Eleanor, this is cruel. Where am I supposed to go? I'm an old woman with cats. Do you expect me to live on the street?" "I expect you to make arrangements, just like you would have to do if you were living anywhere else." "But we're family," Marcus protested. "This is our home too." "No," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "This is my home. You are guests who have been staying here temporarily." "Temporarily?" Betrayal's voice was shrill now. "I've been here for over 2 years. I've built my business here. You can't just kick me out." "I'm not kicking you out. I'm selling my house to buyers who want to live in it themselves." "Then why didn't you tell us you were thinking about this?" Patricia demanded. "Why didn't you include us in the decision?" I looked around the table at their faces. Shocked, angry, betrayed. They genuinely didn't understand why I had made this choice, without consulting them. "The same reason you didn't include me in the decision to call me a burden at Christmas dinner," I said quietly. The silence returned, heavier this time. "That's what this is about?" Betrayal's voice was smaller now. "Eleanor, I was just being honest. I didn't mean anything personal by it." You didn't mean anything personal by calling me a burden in my own home, in front of my entire family, while eating food I cooked at a table I set with dishes I washed. We were all just frustrated. You know we appreciate everything you've done. Do I? Because for 3 years, I've watched all of you get more and more comfortable treating this house like your personal hotel, and me like the staff. None of you contribute meaningfully to the household expenses. None of you help maintain the property. None of you show any consideration for the fact that this is my home and I might want some say in how it's used. That's not fair, Derek interrupted. We help out. You help out by eating my food and using my utilities and leaving your cryptocurrency. Equipment running in my basement 24 hours a day, driving up my electric bill by hundreds of dollars a month. I told you that was an investment. Your investment, using resources I pay for, in space I provide, without asking my permission or offering to compensate me for the costs. I looked at each of them in turn. Marcus, when was the last time you thanked me for letting you live here rent-free? Brielle, when was the last time you asked permission before using my kitchen for your business, or my living room for your meetings? Derek, when was the last time you bought groceries for the household instead of just for yourself? Patricia, when was the last time you checked with me before inviting friends over to my house? No one answered. And Dolores, when was the last time you treated me like the homeowner instead of like another housemate you could boss around and criticize? Eleanor, we're family, Patricia said, her voice pleading now. Families help each other. Yes, they do. But families also respect each other. Families express gratitude. Families don't take advantage of generosity until it becomes an expectation, and then call the person providing that generosity a burden. Where are we supposed to go? Camden asked quietly. He had been silent through the entire exchange, and his question was genuine, not accusatory. I don't know, sweetheart, I said, and my voice was gentler with him than with the adults. But people find housing every day. There are apartments and rental houses and other family members who might help adults figure these things out. But we can't all find places in 3 weeks, Marcus protested. The rental market is terrible right now. Then you should have thought about that before you all got so comfortable assuming this arrangement was permanent. So you're just going to throw us all out on the street? Derek's voice was getting louder. After everything we've been through? What you've been through is 3 years of free housing, free utilities, and subsidized living, while I've been footing the bill and providing the space. What I've been through is 3 years of being taken for granted in my own home until I was finally told I was a burden for having feelings about it. We can't find places to live in 3 weeks. Brielle was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. This is heartless, Eleanor. I can't believe you're doing this to us. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm selling my house. What you do about your housing situation is your responsibility, just like it would be if you were living anywhere else. But we're not living anywhere else, Patricia said desperately. We're living here, and we assumed. You assumed wrong. Marcus was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, this isn't like you. You've always been there for us when we needed help. I have been there for you. For 3 years I've been there for all of you. I opened my home, spent my money, gave up my privacy and my peace of mind. I've been there for you right up until the moment you decided I was a burden for wanting to be treated with basic respect in my own house. So you're punishing us? Derek asked. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm making a decision about my own life and my own property. Where are you going to live? Camden asked. I'll figure that out. Adults do. The room fell silent again. I could see them all processing, trying to figure out if there was some way to change my mind. Some argument they hadn't tried. Finally, Dolores spoke up. "Eleanor, please. I know we haven't always been perfect housemates, but surely we can work this out. Can't you call the buyers and tell them you've changed your mind?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I haven't changed my mind." "But surely—" "Dolores, I'm 72 years old. I've spent the last 3 years of my life, 3 years I can't get back, accommodating everyone else's needs and wants and crises. I've been called a burden for having feelings about how I'm treated in my own home. I'm done accommodating. I'm done compromising. I'm done being generous to people who think generosity is something they're entitled to, instead of something they should be grateful for." I stood up from the table, leaving my cake half-eaten. "The house closes on February 10th. I suggest you all start making your plans. The next few days were intense." Marcus tried the guilt approach first. He sat me down Monday morning with coffee and spoke in the reasonable, patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years. "Mom, I understand you're upset about what Betrayal said at Christmas. But don't you think selling the house is an extreme reaction? We can talk about boundaries, establish some house rules, maybe work out a more formal arrangement." "What kind of formal arrangement?" "Well, we could contribute more to expenses, maybe take turns with household responsibilities, give you more space when you need it." "You mean you could start acting like considerate house guests instead of entitled teenagers?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" "Marcus, you're 45 years old. You've been living in my house for 3 years without paying rent, without contributing meaningfully to household expenses, without showing basic consideration for my space or my schedule. You sleep until noon, complain about how unfair life is, and expect me to provide room and board while you figure yourself out. What would you call that behavior?" "I've been going through a difficult time." "For 3 years?" "Marcus, everybody goes through difficult times. The difference is that most people don't expect their elderly mothers to subsidize their self-pity indefinitely." He stared at his coffee. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Where do other 45-year-old men live when they don't have mothers willing to house them indefinitely? This is really about Betrayal, isn't it?" "This is about all of you. Betrayal just said out loud what you've all been thinking." Patricia tried next, coming to me Tuesday evening after everyone else had gone to bed. "Mom, I get that you're angry. But think about Camden. He's a senior in high school. Moving right now could affect his college applications, his graduation. Is it fair to disrupt his entire life because you're mad at the adults?" It was a good argument, and she knew it. Camden was the one person in the house who hadn't done anything wrong, who had actually been trying to contribute and plan for his own future. "Patricia, I'm not doing this to hurt Camden, but I'm also not going to let concern for Camden be used to manipulate me into continuing an arrangement that's been harmful to me." "Harmful?" "Mom, we're your family." "Family can be harmful, Patricia. Family can take advantage. Family can be cruel and thoughtless and entitled. Being related to someone doesn't give you the right to treat them badly. We don't treat you badly." "Don't you?" "When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you considered whether I might want friends over without having to navigate around your schedule? When was the last time you thanked me for letting you live here instead of acting like it's something I owe you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "We can change," she said finally. "It's too late for that." "Why? Why is it too late?" "Because I don't want to change you, Patricia. I want my life back." Derek's approach was predictably aggressive. Wednesday morning, he cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. "This is bullshit, Eleanor, and you know it. You can't just destroy everyone's life because your feelings got hurt." "I'm not destroying anyone's life. I'm selling my house." Same thing. No, it's not. Your life is not my responsibility. We're family. You're my daughter's husband. That makes you my son-in-law, not my dependent. I've been trying to find work. For 3 years. Derek, people who are serious about finding work find work. People who are serious about supporting their families don't spend their days day trading and mining cryptocurrency in someone else's basement. That equipment is an investment. It's gambling, and you're gambling with resources I provide. My electricity, my space, my internet connection? Fine, I'll get rid of the equipment. Derek, you're missing the point. This isn't about the equipment. This isn't about any one thing. This is about 3 years of being taken for granted and then being told I'm a burden when I finally reach my limit. So change the arrangement. Charge us rent. I don't want to be your landlord, Derek. I want you to be someone else's tenant. Brielle's attempts at reconciliation were the most painful to watch. She started with tears and apologies, moved on to promises of change, and eventually got angry when none of. It worked. I said I was sorry about the burden comment, she cried Thursday evening. What more do you want from me? I want you to find somewhere else to live. But why? I apologized. I know I was wrong. Brielle, you weren't wrong because you said something mean. You were wrong because you meant it. And the fact that you said it in front of my entire family, in my own home, while eating food I cooked, tells me everything I need to know about how you really see me. That's not how I see you. Isn't it? You see me as someone whose feelings don't matter. Someone whose home you can use for your business without asking. Someone whose resources you can consume without contributing. Someone who should be grateful that you're allowing me to serve you. That's not true. Then why did you call me a burden, Brielle? What was burdensome about me wanting basic consideration in my own home? She couldn't answer that. Only Camden approached me with dignity. Friday afternoon, he knocked on my bedroom door and asked if we could talk. Grandma, I want you to know I understand why you're doing this. That surprised me. Do you? Yeah. I mean, I don't want to move. And it's going to be really hard to finish senior year somewhere else. But I get it. Everyone's been treating you like you're not even here. Like this is their house, and you just happen to live in it too. Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you going to be okay? I mean, where are you going to live? It was the first time anyone had asked about my plans with genuine concern rather than accusation. I'm going to be fine, Camden. Better than fine, actually. I'm looking at some nice places where I can make new friends and not have to worry about taking care of everyone else all the time. Will you still be my grandma? The question broke my heart. I will always be your grandma, and you will always be welcome wherever I end up, as long as you call first and treat my home with respect. He hugged me then, and I realized it was the first time anyone had hugged me since this whole thing started. As February 10th approached, the house became a flurry of activity. Moving trucks, apartment searches, frantic phone calls to friends and relatives. Everyone was scrambling to figure out their next move, and the stress was palpable. Marcus found a studio apartment across town and spent his days moving his belongings in multiple trips in his aging Honda. Watching him pack up 3 years' worth of accumulated possessions, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Patricia and Derek found a 2-bedroom rental house about 20 minutes away. It was smaller than they wanted and more expensive than they hoped, but it was available immediately and would allow Camden to finish his senior year at the same school. The rent is twice what we were hoping to pay, Patricia told me as she packed up their room. And we'll have to get new furniture for the living room since we've been using yours. I almost felt sorry for her, But then I remembered that they'd been living rent-free in my house for 3 years. Even if their new rent was expensive, they'd saved enough in those 3 years to afford it for quite a while. Betrayal found a room in a house with 3 other women, all of whom were apparently also building wellness businesses. She was the most dramatic about the move, crying and carrying on about how this would destroy her client relationships and set back her business plans. I built my whole brand around the stability of having a home base. She sobbed to Marcus as they loaded her workout equipment into a rented van. My clients trusted me because I wasn't some fly-by-night operation working out of different locations. The irony was incredible. She had built her brand on the stability of my home, using my space and resources, and now she was acting like I was sabotaging her by reclaiming my own property. Dolores was the most challenging situation. At her age, with limited income and 3 cats, her options were severely restricted. She eventually arranged to move in with a niece in Hartford, but the niece could only take her temporarily and couldn't accommodate the cats. I'm going to have to surrender them to the shelter, Dolores told me Wednesday evening, genuine grief in her voice. That hit me harder than anything else that had happened. Whatever my feelings about Dolores, the cats were innocent, and they'd been part of the household for 2 years. I'll pay for a pet-friendly apartment for the first month, I offered. That'll give you time to find a permanent solution without surrendering the cats. She stared at me. After everything that's happened, you'd do that? I'm not heartless, Dolores. I just want my house back. It was the closest thing to a reconciliation any of us managed. February 10th dawned cold and gray. With snow in the forecast, the Weatherbees were scheduled to do their final walkthrough at 10 a.m., and the closing was set for 2 p.m. By 8 a.m., the house was empty except for me and my own belongings. Everyone else had cleared out by the previous evening, leaving behind only cleaning supplies and a few forgotten items in closets. I walked through the rooms one last time, remembering the living room where Robert and I had watched movies every Sunday night, the kitchen where I'd taught both my children to cook, the bedroom where we'd slept for 30 years, where I'd held him the night before he died. But I also remembered the last 3 years. Marcus sleeping on the couch until noon. Brielle's workout equipment scattered across my beautiful hardwood floors. Derek's mining equipment humming in the basement. The constant chaos, the lack of privacy, the gradual erosion of gratitude into entitlement. I wasn't sad to leave those memories behind. The Weatherbees arrived for their walkthrough right on time, accompanied by Margaret and their agent. They were delighted with the house, exclaiming over details they'd forgotten from the original showing and making plans for where they'd put their furniture. Mrs. Hartwell, Mrs. Weatherby said as they finished the walkthrough, we just want you to know how much we love this house. We can tell it's been cared for with love, and we promise to take good care of it. I know you will, I said, and I meant it. The closing itself was anticlimactic. Papers to sign, keys to hand over, checks to exchange. By 3 p.m., the house that had been my home for 50 years belonged to someone else. Margaret drove me to my new apartment, a lovely 2-bedroom place in a senior community with activities and social opportunities, and no room for unexpected houseguests. I had arranged for movers to bring my furniture the next day, but for that first night, I camped out with an air mattress and take-out Chinese food. As I sat on that air mattress, eating lo mein with plastic utensils in my empty new apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. For the first time in 3 years, no one needed anything from me. No one was using my kitchen without asking, or running up my utility bills, or treating my home like their personal hotel. No one was going to call me a burden for having feelings, or expectations. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. It's been 6 months since I sold the house, and I thought you might want to know how everyone ended up. Marcus finally got a steady job. Not the high-level position he'd always held. Out for, but honest work that pays the bills. Living in that studio apartment, being responsible for his own rent and utilities, seems to have motivated him in ways that 3 years of my generosity never did. He calls me once a week now, and for the first time in years, our conversations aren't lists of his problems and complaints. Patricia and Derek are doing well in their rental house. Derek found work in construction, which isn't what he'd hoped for, but pays better than his cryptocurrency investments ever did. Patricia got a promotion at work, possibly because she's no longer stressed about her family's housing situation. Camden graduated with honors and got into his first-choice college with a partial scholarship. Brielle's wellness business didn't survive the move, but she got a job as a fitness instructor at a local gym and seems happier than she ever was trying to be an entrepreneur. She sent me a card last month. Not an apology, exactly, but an acknowledgement that she'd learned something from the experience. Dolores is still living temporarily with her niece, but she's been looking into senior communities in the area. Her cats are fine, and she calls me occasionally to complain about her niece's housekeeping, which is somehow comforting in its familiarity. As for me, I'm thriving. I joined a book club, took up watercolor painting, and started volunteering at the local literacy center. I've made friends with several other residents in my building, and we have regular dinners and game nights. I travel when I want to, sleep as late as I like, and keep my own schedule without having to consider anyone else's needs. I bought myself a small houseplant, a peace lily, and I water it when I feel like it, not because someone else has expectations. About my plant care routine. Last month, Marcus asked if he could visit for dinner. I said yes, of course, but I also made it clear that visits needed to be planned in advance, and that my new apartment was my space, with my rules. He was respectful and appreciative, thanked me for dinner, and helped clean up without being asked. Tjartipjo was the nicest time we'd spent together in years. A few people have asked if I regret selling the house. The answer is no, not for a minute. That house was full of beautiful memories with Robert, but it had also become a place where I felt trapped and unappreciated. Sometimes you have to let go of something that used to make you happy in order to find happiness again. I learned something important from this whole experience. There's a difference between being generous and being a doormat. There's a difference between helping family and enabling them. There's a difference between being needed and being used. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with expecting basic respect and gratitude in return for extraordinary generosity. The money from the house sale is sitting in my retirement account, growing steadily and giving me security for whatever comes next. But more importantly, I have something I'd lost without realizing it. My self-respect. I spent 3 years putting everyone else's needs before my own, and I got called a burden for my trouble. Now I put my own needs first, and I've never been happier. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at people who've wronged you. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without them. And that, as they say, was that. Sometimes you have to show people you're not to be trifled with. What do you think? Did they get what they deserved? Or would you have handled it differently? I'd love to read your opinions in the comments below. Have you ever had to teach a lesson to someone who took you for granted? Share your story if you feel comfortable. If you enjoyed seeing these folks get their comeuppance and want more stories of well-deserved revenge, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and click the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Thanks for listening, and remember to stand up for yourselves.